Ladies and gentlemen, can we just take a moment to breathe this in? We're here, a new year, a blank page, and I can almost hear that little voice whispering in your ear, don't waste it. Let's start with intention. And I don't mean that fuzzy New Year's resolution kind of intention that fades by February. I mean the kind of intention that carves rivers through stone, consistent, focused, and unwavering. Too often we treat our goals like wishes. We write them down, light a candle, and hope the universe takes care of the rest. But hope isn't a strategy, and wishes don't build futures. Intention, real intention, is about clarity and commitment. It's about knowing what you want and showing up for it every single day. I think back to a time when I was completely overwhelmed by everything I wanted to accomplish. My to-do list was endless and every item on it felt urgent, but instead of making progress, I felt paralyzed. I was spinning my wheels, mistaking movement for momentum. Then, someone gave me a piece of advice that changed everything. They said, if you don't define your priorities, the world will define them for you. That hit me hard because it was true. I had been living reactively, answering emails, checking boxes, saying yes to things that didn't even matter to me, and I had confused being busy with being purposeful. So I stopped. I stepped back and asked myself a simple but powerful question. What actually matters not just today, but this year, this season of my life? What do I want to create? Who do I want to become? And how do I want to feel at the end of it all? Answering those questions gave me focus. It made me intentional about how I spent my time, my energy, and even my thoughts. Here's the truth, we don't drift toward greatness. We don't accidentally end up where we want to be. We have to aim ourselves like an arrow. We have to point our lives in the direction we want them to go, and then keep when the path is up as uphill, even when progress feels slow. I learned this lesson again when my daughter was learning to ride a bike. She'd wobble and panic, convinced she was going to fall. And every time I'd tell her the same thing, where you look is where you'll go. If she stared at the ground, she'd veer off course and tip over. But the moment she focused her eyes straight ahead, she'd find her balance and ride forward. That's how it works in life too. Where you focus your energy, your attention, is exactly where you'll end up. The problem is, we live in a world full of distractions, notifications, news feeds, and everyone else's expectations pulling us in 100 different directions. If we're not intentional, we lose sight of our goals. We waste days, weeks, even years chasing things that don't actually matter. And the scariest part, we don't even realize it's happening until we look back and wonder where all the time went. So today, I want to challenge you to pause, to reflect, to decide what you're aiming for this year, not just in your career, but in your relationships, your health, your personal growth. And then I want you to write it down. Put it somewhere you'll see it every day. Tape it to your bathroom mirror. Set it as your phone's wallpaper, because without intention, we're not steering, we're drifting. And here's the thing about drifting. It feels easy at first. You're just going with the flow, letting life happen to you. But over time, you start to feel empty, disconnected from your purpose, and dissatisfied with where you are. That's why intention matters. It's the anchor that keeps us grounded and the compass that keeps us moving forward. I know it can feel overwhelming to think about everything you want to accomplish this year, especially if you've started before and fallen short. But let me remind you of something. Intention isn't about perfection. It's about direction. It's about waking up every day and deciding, this is who I'm becoming, this is what I'm building, and this is where I'm going. So whether your goal is to start a business, write a book, get healthier, or deepen your relationships, don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until you feel ready. Start today. Get clear about what you want, and then go after it like it's the most important thing in the world. Because it is. Your time, your energy, your potential, they're too valuable to waste. Where you look is where you'll go. So fix your eyes on something that matters. Set your intentions high and then let them pull you forward. This year doesn't have to be just another chapter. It can be the turning point, the moment everything changes, not because you wished for it, but because you decided to make it. So let's be honest. Success isn't born in our comfort zones. It's born in that shaky, sweaty palm space where we don't know if we'll fly or fall. Comfort is seductive. It's warm, familiar, and easy, but growth doesn't happen there. Growth happens when we step outside of what we know and risk being seen, risk being wrong, and risk being vulnerable. It happens when we lean into discomfort and say, I'm scared, but I'm doing it anyway. I'll never forget the first time I stood on a stage to speak. My palms were sweating so much that I had to wipe them on my pants before stepping out. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure the audience could hear it. And as I opened my mouth, my voice cracked. For a split second, I thought about turning around and walking off the stage. But then something shifted. I realized that fear wasn't a sign I was failing, it was a sign I was growing. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's feeling the fear and showing up anyway. It's making the phone call, sending the email, submitting the application, or sharing your story, even when your voice shakes. Too many of us spend our lives waiting to feel ready, waiting for the fear to go away before we take the leap. But let me tell you something, fear doesn't go away. It doesn't magically disappear when the timing is right. What changes isn't the fear, it's you. You get braver. You build the muscles of courage by using them, not by waiting for the fear to subside. I think we often mistake comfort for safety. We tell ourselves, if I stay here, in this job, in this relationship, in this version of myself, at least I know what to expect. But comfort can be a trap. It keeps us stuck in places where we don't belong and prevents us from becoming the people we're meant to be. Several years ago, I was offered an opportunity that terrified me. It required me to move, to leave behind the stability I had worked so hard to build, and to step into a role that felt far bigger than I was. Every voice in my head told me to say no, stay where it's safe, don't risk it, what if you fail? But there was another voice too, a quieter one that whispered, what if this is exactly what you're supposed to do? I said yes, not because I wasn't scared, but because I decided to trust myself more than I trusted my fear. And let me tell you, there were moments I thought I had made a mistake. Moments I wanted to run back to safety. But over time, something amazing happened. I grew into that role. I became the kind of person who could handle the responsibility I was given, not because I was ready from the start, but because I kept showing up. That's the secret about courage. It's not something you have. It's something you practice. And every time you take a step outside your comfort zone, you build it a little more. Every time you face your fear and keep going, you prove to yourself that you can do hard things. Think about this for a moment. Every person you admire, every author, artist, entrepreneur, or leader was scared at some point. They doubted themselves. They questioned whether they were enough. But they didn't let fear have the final say. They felt it, acknowledged it, and then kept going. I read a quote once that said, "Fear is excitement without breath." That stuck with me because so often the things we're afraid of are the things we want most. That job, that opportunity, that relationship. But instead of leaning in, we hold back. We convince ourselves that fear means stop when really it means pay attention. It means we're standing at the edge of something that matters. The truth is, courage doesn't always look dramatic. It's not always skydiving or giving a TED Talk. Sometimes courage is just speaking up at a meeting. It's having a hard conversation with someone you care about. It's saying no to something that isn't aligned with your values, or saying yes to something that terrifies you. I think back to a moment early in my career when I was asked to pitch an idea in front of my entire team. I stayed up all night preparing, but when the time came, my voice trembled and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I felt exposed, like everyone could see how nervous I was. But after the meeting, someone came up to me and said, "Thank you for speaking up. You said what I was too afraid to say." That moment taught me something. Courage isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. And when we're real, when we show up as we are, fears and all, it gives other people permission to do the same. So here's what I want you to remember. Courage isn't something you're born with. It's something you choose over and over again. It's deciding that your dreams are more important than your fear. It's stepping into the unknown and trusting that you'll figure it out along the way. You don't have to be fearless to succeed this year. You just have to be brave for a moment longer than your fear. That's it. One moment of bravery at a time. Because courage isn't about never falling, it's about always getting back up. Let's talk about discipline, the least glamorous but most essential ingredient for success. Discipline doesn't get the spotlight. It's not flashy and it doesn't come with applause. No one throws a parade because you woke up early to work out or spend an hour practicing your craft instead of scrolling through your phone. But discipline is the difference between people who dream about success and people who achieve it. It's the quiet, consistent effort that turns intentions into results. I used to believe discipline was about willpower, that some people were just naturally more motivated than others. But then I started paying attention to the habits of successful people, and I realized something important. They weren't relying on motivation. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes like the weather. And if you're waiting to feel inspired before you act, you're going to spend a lot of time standing still. Discipline, on the other hand, doesn't care how you feel. It doesn't ask if you're tired, busy, or in the mood. It just asks one question: did you show up? That's it. And the people who succeed, they show up even when it's inconvenient. They show up even when it's uncomfortable. They show up when no one's watching, and they do the work that no one will ever see. I remember when I first decided to write a book, I was excited, overflowing with ideas and motivation. But after a few weeks, that initial spark started to fade. Writing wasn't fun anymore, it felt like a chore. I'd stare at the blank page, convinced I had nothing valuable to say, and every time I thought about quitting, another voice in my head would whisper, "This is what separates the amateurs from the pros." The pros don't wait for inspiration. They sit down and write whether the words come easily or not. They show up and do the work. That's what I told myself every day. And slowly, painfully, the book started to take shape. Not because I was particularly brilliant, but because I was consistent. Discipline isn't about being perfect. It's about being committed. It's about creating habits that keep you moving forward, even on the days when you don't feel like it. And let me tell you, those days will come. There will be mornings when the alarm clock feels like your enemy and evenings when Netflix seems more appealing than your goals. Discipline is what keeps you focused when motivation disappears. I once read about an Olympic swimmer who trained every single day for years, even on holidays. People called her obsessed, but she said, "You don't get to the Olympics by swimming when you feel like it." That stuck with me because it's true for all of us. You don't build a business, write a book, get healthy, or create anything meaningful by working on it when you're in the mood. You build it by showing up over and over again until it becomes part of who you are. One of the most powerful lessons I've learned is that discipline isn't just about what you do, it's about what you stop doing. It's about saying no to distractions, excuses, and the endless list of reasons why you can't start today. It's about creating boundaries and protecting your priorities, because if you don't, something else will always take their place. I had a friend who wanted to start a business but kept putting it off because life was too busy. He'd say, "I'll start when things calm down." But here's the truth, things never calm down. Life doesn't slow down to make room for your dreams. You have to carve out that space for yourself. You have to decide that your goals are important enough to prioritize. And that's what discipline is. It's prioritizing what matters most. It's choosing long-term success over short-term comfort. It's saying, "I'm doing this because it matters," even when no one else understands. One of my favorite examples of this is Serena Williams. She didn't become one of the greatest athletes of all time because she was more talented than everyone else. She became great because she practiced more, trained harder, and committed to showing up when others didn't. She was disciplined enough to keep going when most people would have quit. But let me be clear, discipline doesn't mean you never struggle. It doesn't mean you don't get tired or frustrated. It means you keep going anyway. It means you trust the process, even when you can't see the results yet. Think about a farmer planting seeds. They don't dig them up every day to see if they're growing. They water them, they protect them, and they trust that with time and care, those seeds will grow. That's what discipline is. It's planting the seeds of success and showing up to water them, even when you don't see anything sprouting yet. And here's the thing, discipline creates momentum. The more you show up, the easier it gets. Small habits compound into big changes. 5 minutes of writing turns into a chapter. One workout turns into a healthier lifestyle. One phone call turns into a business deal. I'll never forget the first time I committed to waking up an hour earlier each morning to focus on a personal project. At first, it felt impossible. I hated it. But after a few weeks, something shifted. It didn't feel like a chore anymore. It felt like part of who I was. That's the power of discipline. It rewires your identity. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who's trying to succeed, and you start seeing yourself as someone who's already successful because you're doing the work. So if you're waiting for the perfect moment to start, stop waiting. If you're waiting to feel motivated, stop waiting. Start now, start messy, start scared, but start, because discipline isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up one small step at a time until those steps carry you all the way to success. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. You're going to fail this year. And that's not a prediction, it's a guarantee. But before you let that thought settle in your chest like a weight, let me tell you something even more important. Failure isn't final. It's not the end of the story unless you let it be. It's just the part where the plot thickens, the character struggles, and the real growth begins. We're so conditioned to avoid failure that we miss its gifts. We think failing means we're not good enough, not smart enough, not talented enough. But failure isn't proof that you're not capable. It's proof that you're trying. It's evidence that you're in the game instead of sitting on the sidelines. And if you're failing, it means you're learning. You're figuring out what doesn't work so you can get closer to what does. I still remember the first time I completely bombed a presentation. I had spent weeks preparing. I knew my material inside and out, but when I got up in front of the room, something went wrong. My slides wouldn't load. My voice cracked. I lost my train of thought and stumbled through the rest of it, feeling like I had completely embarrassed myself. When I sat down, all I could think about was quitting. I told myself I wasn't cut out for public speaking. I convinced myself that failure was proof I didn't belong. But here's what happened next. I didn't quit. I went home, rewatched the recording, and took notes on what I could do better. I practiced harder, simplified my slides, and prepared for the unexpected. And the next time I stood on that stage, I was stronger. Not because I magically became fearless, but because failure had taught me something. It had shown me my weaknesses, but it had also shown me my strength, the ability to get back up and try again. That's what resilience is. It's not avoiding failure, it's learning to rise after it. It's trusting yourself enough to know that falling down doesn't mean you're finished. It means you're human. And being human means being imperfect. Think about the stories we admire most: heroes who rise from rock bottom, inventors who keep experimenting after hundreds of failures, athletes who come back stronger after losing a championship. Those stories inspire us not because they're perfect, but because they're messy. They're filled with moments of doubt and fear and disappointment, but also grit, determination, and persistence. One of my favorite examples of resilience is Thomas Edison. I just found 1,000 ways that didn't work. Imagine if he had stopped at attempt number 500 or 800. Imagine if he had let failure define him instead of fuel him. That's what resilience looks like: seeing failure as feedback, not defeat. It's looking at the wreckage of a plan that didn't work and asking, what can I learn from this? Instead of what's wrong with me. It's shifting the narrative from I failed to I'm figuring it out. I think we're often so afraid of failure because we tie it to our worth. We make it personal. If something doesn't work, we assume it means we're not enough. But failure isn't personal. It's situational. It's data. It's just information that helps us course correct and grow. I learned this lesson again when I was launching a project that completely flopped. I had poured my heart into it, convinced it was going to be a success. And when it wasn't, I felt crushed. But as I looked closer, I started to see why it didn't work. I had been playing it safe, trying to create something that would appeal to everyone instead of something that was bold and authentic. Failure showed me what I was missing, and it pushed me to take bigger risks the next time. And that's another truth about failure: it forces us to get honest. It reveals the gaps we didn't want to see and the cracks we were trying to ignore. It shows us what's not working so we can build something stronger. Failure doesn't break us, it breaks us open. I once heard someone say that failure is a bruise, not a tattoo. It might sting for a while, but it's not permanent. It fades, and when it does, it leaves us tougher, wiser, and better prepared for what's next. But only if we let it. Only if we stop treating failure like a shameful secret and start treating it like a badge of honor. Because here's the truth: resilience isn't born out of success, it's born out of failure. It's built in the moments when we want to quit but choose to keep going. It's forged in the fire of rejection, disappointment, and setbacks. And every time we rise, we get a little stronger. I think about kids learning to walk. They fall dozens, maybe hundreds of times before they take their first steps. But they don't stop trying just because they fall. They don't decide they're not meant to walk. They keep getting up over and over again until one day they're running. Somewhere along the way, though, we forget that falling is part of the process. We start seeing it as failure instead of progress. But what if we stopped seeing failure as something to fear and started seeing it as something to embrace? What if we treated every mistake as proof that we're learning, growing, and evolving? What if we celebrated the courage it takes to try and fail instead of only celebrating the end result? Because at the end of the day, success isn't about how many times you avoid falling. It's about how many times you get back up. It's about the grit it takes to keep moving forward when everything in you wants to give up. So when failure comes in, don't hide from it. Don't let it convince you to stop. Face it. Learn from it. Let it shape you, but don't let it define you. Because resilience isn't about bouncing back to who you were before. It's about bouncing forward to who you're becoming. And that's the version of you who's unstoppable. Let's talk about focus, the quiet force that separates those who dream from those who do. Focus isn't about working harder, it's about working smarter. It's about clearing away the noise, tuning out the distractions, and channeling your energy toward what matters most. And in a world that's constantly pulling us in 100 different directions, focus is more than a skill, it's a lifeline. We live in an age of endless notifications, constant updates, and infinite scrolling. Our attention is under siege. We start our mornings with good intentions, but before we know it, we're lost in a sea of emails, social media, and other people's priorities. And by the end of the day, we're exhausted but not accomplished, busy but not productive. It's like trying to run a marathon in quicksand, constantly moving but never really getting anywhere. I learned this the hard way. I used to pride myself on being a multitasker. I'd have 12 tabs open on my browser, 3 different projects halfway done, and my phone lighting up every few minutes. I thought I was being efficient. But what I was really doing was diluting my efforts, scattering my energy across so many things that nothing was getting my full attention. And you know what happens when nothing gets your full attention? Nothing gets finished. Nothing gets built. Nothing grows. I'll never forget the moment that changed my perspective. I was working late one night, trying to juggle multiple deadlines, and I looked up at the clock only to realize I had spent hours working without actually completing anything meaningful. I was busy but not focused. That night I made a decision. I stopped multitasking and started time blocking. I started dedicating specific chunks of my day to specific tasks, no interruptions, no distractions. And the difference was immediate. My work improved. My stress decreased. And most importantly, I felt a sense of momentum that I hadn't felt in a long time. Focus isn't about doing more, it's about doing less, but doing it better. It's about getting clear on what deserves your attention and giving yourself permission to let go of everything else. That's hard for a lot of us, especially when we feel the pressure to do it all, to be it all, and to keep up with everyone around us. But here's the truth, trying to do everything keeps you from doing anything well. One of the most powerful lessons I've learned is that focus isn't just about what you say yes to, it's about what you say no to. It's about setting boundaries, protecting your time, and having the courage to let go of the things that don't align with your goals. And that's not easy. Saying no feels uncomfortable. It can feel like you're letting people down or missing out on opportunities. But every time you say yes to something that doesn't matter, you're saying no to something that does. I think about one of my mentors who built a thriving business while raising a family. When I asked her how she managed to balance it all, she said, "I don't balance it all. I focus on what matters and I let the rest go." That stuck with me because it's the opposite of what we're often told. We're told to strive for balance, to try to keep all the plates spinning at once. But focus isn't about spinning plates, it's about deciding which plates matter and letting the rest fall. And let's be honest, focus isn't easy. It takes discipline to ignore the noise and resist the urge to jump from one thing to another. It takes courage to step away from distractions and trust that deep work will pay off. But here's what I know: focus creates results. It turns effort into impact and ideas into action. I think back to a friend who decided to write a novel. For years, she talked about it, dreamed about it, but never actually started. She was waiting for the right moment, the perfect stretch of free time when she could finally focus. But that moment never came. So one day, she decided to make time instead of waiting for it. She set her alarm an hour earlier and wrote for 60 minutes every morning, no matter what. No phone, no email, just her and the blank page. And within a year, she finished her manuscript. Not because she worked harder than anyone else, but because she worked smarter. She focused. That's the secret to achieving big goals, breaking them down into small, focused actions and showing up for them consistently. Focus is about knowing that progress doesn't happen in leaps, it happens in steps. It's not glamorous, it's not always exciting, but it works. I once heard someone describe focus as the ability to keep the main thing the main thing. That's simple, but it's powerful. Because the truth is, it's easy to get distracted. It's easy to chase shiny objects, compare ourselves to others, and feel like we're always behind. But focus brings us back. It reminds us that success isn't about doing everything, it's about doing the right things one step at a time. I think about athletes training for a championship. They don't waste time on things that won't improve their performance. They're laser focused on the drills, the habits, and the routines that move them closer to victory. They know that every minute matters, and they treat their time like the precious resource it is. That's the mindset we need to adopt, not just for this year, but for life. Focus is about valuing your time enough to invest it wisely. It's about protecting your energy from distractions and pouring it into what actually matters. It's about understanding that you don't have to do more to achieve more, you just have to do the right things with intention and consistency. And here's what I know for sure: when you focus, momentum builds. Small wins stack up. Progress compounds. And before you know it, the thing that once felt impossible becomes inevitable. Not because you were the most talented or the most prepared, but because you were focused enough to keep showing up and doing the work. Focus isn't flashy. It doesn't get headlines, but it's the foundation of every success story you've ever admired. It's the quiet, steady force that turns plans into results and dreams into reality. And when you commit to focus, everything changes, not all at once, but step by step, day by day, until one day you look up and realize you're exactly where you wanted to be.